Imagine believing truly, unshakably that God himself chose you to rule, that every command you give carries divine authority, that questioning you is not just rebellion against a king, but a sin against heaven. Now imagine watching that belief drag an entire nation into chaos, war, and finally to a scaffold where the crowd waits in silence for the blade to fall. This is not just the story of a king. This is the story of power, how it is claimed, how it is abused, and how it can destroy the very person who believes he owns it. This is the story of Charles I, the only English king ever executed by his own people. Charles Stuart did not grow up expecting greatness. He was quiet, awkward, physically weak, and always overshadowed by his older brother, Prince Henry. When Henry died suddenly, Charles became the heir almost by accident. From a young age, he learned something dangerous, that his position was not earned, but granted by fate, by God. This belief would become the core of his identity. When Charles became king in 1625, he did not see himself as a servant of the nation. He saw himself as God's representative on earth, ruling by divine right. To Charles, compromise was weakness. Opposition was heresy. England, however, was changing. Parliament was growing stronger, the people more politically aware, and religious tensions were boiling beneath the surface. Charles married a Catholic princess in a deeply Protestant country. He promoted religious policies that many believe pushed England back toward Catholicism. Suspicion followed him everywhere. Parliament demanded accountability, especially money. Charles demanded obedience. Neither side trusted the other, and Charles refused to understand a simple truth: power in England was no longer absolute. When Parliament challenged him, Charles did something unheard of. He dissolved it, again and again. For 11 years, he ruled without Parliament, raising money through questionable taxes and ancient laws twisted to serve his will. To Charles, this was proof of strength. To the nation, it was proof of tyranny. Judges were pressured. Critics were imprisoned. Fear spread quietly, like a storm building beyond the horizon. Religion made everything worse. Charles supported Archbishop William Laud, whose strict religious reforms enraged Puritans. Churches were forced into uniform rituals. Dissenters were punished. Many began to believe that Charles was not only a tyrant, but a threat to their souls. Scotland rebelled first, refusing Charles's religious control. War followed, and war required money. Desperate, Charles was forced to call Parliament back, but it was too late. Parliament no longer wanted negotiation. They wanted limits. They wanted guarantees. Charles pretended to listen, but in his heart, he never abandoned his belief in absolute authority. He plotted in secret, searching for allies, playing factions against each other. Trust collapsed completely when Charles did the unthinkable. He marched into Parliament with soldiers to arrest his critics. No English king had ever done this. The message was clear. The king was willing to use force against his own government. England split apart. Civil war erupted in 1642. Families were divided. Towns burned. Blood soaked the countryside. Charles led his armies personally, convinced God would grant him victory. But faith could not replace strategy, unity, or popular support. Parliament's forces, disciplined and driven, slowly gained the advantage. At the center of their rise stood Oliver Cromwell, a man who believed just as strongly as Charles, but believed that kings could be held accountable. Charles lost the war. Captured, defeated, and humiliated, he still refused to accept reality. Even as a prisoner, he negotiated in bad faith, secretly encouraging new uprisings. Thousands died in renewed fighting sparked by his deception. To his enemies, this was the final proof Charles Stuart could never be trusted. As long as he lived, peace was impossible. What happened next shattered centuries of tradition. Parliament put the king on trial, not as a monarch, not as God's chosen ruler, but as a man. Charles refused to recognize the court's authority. He insisted no one had the right to judge a king, but the trial continued without him. The verdict was inevitable. Guilty of tyranny, guilty of treason against his own people, guilty of spilling innocent blood. On a cold January day in 1649, Charles I walked to the scaffold outside the banqueting house in London. He dressed carefully, wearing extra layers so no one would mistake shivering for fear. In his final moments, he still believed history would vindicate him. He placed his head on the block. The axe fell. With one stroke, the divine right of kings died alongside him. England became a republic. The monarchy was abolished. The world watched in shock. Charles I did not fall because he was weak. He fell because he was unyielding. because he believed power was something owned, not shared. His story is a warning written in blood that authority without accountability invites resistance. That faith without humility becomes fanaticism, and that no crown, no matter how sacred it seems, is beyond judgment. And long after the echoes of the axe faded, one truth remained. The most dangerous belief a ruler can hold is that he answers to no one.